Squadcast Nation, welcome back. We have Lydia Francesco in the mix, health and wellness specialist, coach, certified personal trainer, all things wellness. I am so glad she's on the show. So Lydia, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Quado. I'm so happy to be here with you.
It's been a long time coming. We've been back and forth a little bit. We have some mutual friends in common, little Heidi, little Jody, who's made an appearance on the show. So I know that this is going to be awesome just because the amount of advocacy for having you on has been tremendous. so Lydia, how did you get into the health and wellness space? Like, what's your background? What's your story?
Yeah, so my story is actually different and interesting, I find anyway. I actually have a bachelor's in international studies, and I worked in politics for a little while. I've also worked in marketing. I had been attending Good Life, the gym, doing group fitness, doing a little body pump. I don't know if you've ever done body pump, or maybe some of the listeners have done body pump, but it was a great program, and I had been doing it as a participant. And it was honestly just how I got into fitness was literally a fluke. I saw a poster one day that said, we're looking to hire instructors for body pump. And I just loved the program so much. And I thought that I would be great at being an instructor. And so typical me, one of the questions I always ask myself is like, what's the worst that can happen, right? And the answer, of course, was like nothing. I just have a good workout. So I tried out and I made it. And then from there, I really just got the bug in terms of actually helping people and working with people. So from there, I progressed into becoming a personal trainer. And then really over the past 11 years have just taken that continuously to the next level in terms of my education and how I help people. And now I'm actually working more in the corporate wellness space and really working with organizations to help them support their employees. Obviously, we're seeing so much stress and burnout everywhere. It's like really kind of an epidemic. And so I'm doing my part to help employees, be their best selves, stay healthy. And I mean, ultimately, it actually benefits the workplace and the organizations where they work, right? So everybody wins.
Amazing. And so really it was just like, did you have your own wellness journey? Or did you just kind of jump into it with the topics you covered, like being a personal trainer and so forth?
So I mean, I've certainly had my own wellness journey. I would say I've grown up fairly healthy. My parents were always really healthy eaters. I mean, we didn't even do like Halloween or Easter. Like we never had candy for those holidays, or we didn't even really participate in them. And it was always lots of fruit and vegetables and all that kind of stuff. So I really grew up with a really good foundation of health and wellness. And so for me, I use that as an example of how I know that it's possible and not even that complicated to have a lifestyle of good health. Where so I'm very much against like quick fads, quick fixes, this whole fixation that our society has with immediacy. It's really hard, but I definitely try and counteract that. And often it's the bad news of telling people, look, there is no quick fix. You have to put in the time and the effort. But there's a lot that people can be doing, as you know, to live a healthy lifestyle and still, do the things they love to do, still enjoy life, still eat fun things that are tasty. I did have a burnout a number of years ago. So that was something that I have gone through that has really helped me. I learned a lot of lessons, obviously, through that time period, and it's something that I draw upon when I'm sharing strategies on how to improve work-life harmony, how to improve work-life integration, how to prevent burnout. I draw from the lessons that I learned from that time period. One of which was seeking out joy. I'm a really big proponent of encouraging people to look at what brings them joy in their lives and do more of that.
Thanks for sharing, Lydia, because I think knowing knowing your instructor or knowing your coach has gone through maybe a shared experience that says a lot, right? Like it really, like when you know they know what you're going through,
Hmm.
it could be quite powerful. So, as you mentioned, when it comes to burnout, one of the key components that you found is really seeking out joy. What are
Hmm.
maybe a two part question? What are kind of the common themes that you see amongst your clients when addressing corporate wellness? And two, what are the kind of approaches that you offer up on how to overcome burnout?
Hmm. So there's a lot. There's a lot. That's a long two-part question, Quadjo. But yeah, I'll do my best to answer both. Okay, so in terms of themes, there's a lot. There's a number of common risk factors for burnout in the workplace. One of the hardest one that I would say is the one around workload. That is absolutely a big one, and it is also the hardest one to overcome because a lot of times, and I've been hearing it a lot recently, which is that so many workplaces are understaffed. And the actual work has, and I mean, gosh, you know this, working in the healthcare sector in the ER, right? I mean, there's just so much work and not enough people. And sometimes it's a matter of there's nobody to fill the spaces, and sometimes it's a matter of budget or structural reasons why they don't have enough staff. That can be a really hard one. I do encourage employers and organizations to look at what they can do to address it, but I realize that that is something that can take a significant amount of time, lots of resources, especially on the financial side. Some of the other pieces in terms of burnout that can be addressed a little more easy are things like making sure people feel appreciated, making sure staff have the resources to be able to do their job properly, right? So these are some key factors. So feeling unappreciated, feeling like they don't are incompetent. Those are the two of the key risk factors, right? So even just if you want to address those two, that can be really helpful. Making sure that your staff gets training if they need it, making sure that they know. A lot of times I see this in bigger organizations where people don't understand how their work fits into the overall picture. And I think sometimes it can be really helpful for people to just feel good about the work they do when they understand how it fits in. And that even if they're just a small little cog in the overall big machine, that their cog is very important because if their cog was missing, the machine wouldn't function, right? So that's just a simplistic of analogy, but letting your employees know, letting your teammates know how their work is important and how it contributes, I think can be really helpful. In terms of the workload piece, one of the things that I do like to suggest as a strategy, it doesn't necessarily help with the workload per se, but it helps with the idea of working more and extra hours and the concept of being always on, right? A lot of times nowadays, people just feel always on, right? Like everyone's got their phone, they can be checking their work emails from their phone and all this kind of thing. So I encourage leaders to have a conversation and set up some team norms around communication. And so, what does that look like? It looks like talking about all the millions of channels that are out there now, right? I mean, there's not only is there email, there's the old school phone, which probably nobody uses, there's texting, there's Teams, team chats, or Slack. I don't even know. I feel like there's just so many other channels of communication, and people, I've heard this from clients where they're literally can practically spend most of their day just bopping between all the communication channels, and they're basically not getting any work done because they're just trying to keep up with the flow of information. So have a conversation with your team, decide as a group, what are our preferences, how do we like to communicate, which of those channels do we prefer, which of the channels are most appropriate for certain types of a discussion, right? So sometimes email can be more appropriate than the stream of chat within Teams or Slack, right? Also setting up things like, how do we communicate urgency, especially outside of work hours, right? So I like to suggest, as an example, not email. So maybe if there's an urgent thing, you literally pick up the phone and call the person. And what that does is that can alleviate some of the need for somebody to be checking their email on the weekend just to see if by chance something urgent has come in, right? So again, it's really, and again, it's not for me to dictate exactly how people structure this, but it's about having the conversation, discussing it as a team, coming up with some guidelines, and then following through and kind of putting those into practice.
That is brilliant because, as you said, it is hard to unplug or disconnect
Mm-hmm.
in 2023. It really is.
Yeah.
I consciously try and advocate for this amongst my own team, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's a researcher, my ICU group, even my admin. I do not text her past. I try not to text her anyway. Past
Mm-hmm.
6 o'clock, as an
Mm-hmm.
example. I
Mm-hmm.
encourage folks not to check their emails in the evening or on weekends. If it is urgent, pick up the freaking phone. It's okay to
Mm-hmm.
still to talk to folks. So
Yeah.
I think what you're mentioning is really important, especially people. We're in a healing phase right now. A lot of corporations, especially I know corporations, but also in the
Mm-hmm.
medical field in healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to heal post, and so
Yeah.
these advice and these techniques are so important. And the other one that I think, like, I'm paraphrasing a bit, Lydia, but when you were describing the cog, what role you play, I also
Mm-hmm.
think of how important it is to recognize your purpose, like why
Mm-hmm.
you're there, and focusing on that. Like, why did you take that job? Why did you decide to be that nurse or analyst or what have you, and recognizing that what you do is extremely important, and the organization or the corporation could not thrive without your input, without your knowledge, without your game. I really
Mm-hmm.
think this is all these points really add to healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few other things just to add on to that idea of communication, especially from a leader perspective. So absolutely number one is leading by example, just across the board for leaders. You have to be leading by example on all fronts, which can be a challenge, of course. But even from this communication front, right? If you're sending out the text, sending out the emails at the off hours, it can make the employees feel like they should be paying attention to that. So there's two strategies that I like to suggest on that. One is we have great technology. There's this wonderful thing called Send Later, and I encourage people to use it, right? It can be hard. You have to get into the habit of, you have to click an extra button or like the down arrow or the up arrow, and it takes a few extra steps. But then at least you're not sending stuff, or it's showing up that you've sent it at like 8 p.m. or midnight or whatever times you might be sending stuff at. The other option, which I think can be helpful just in general, is being very clear with expectations. So if you're sending out an email and it either requires information back from the person or it requires them to do a task, be specific about your timelines. So, even in the email, like you might just be thinking of something, but doesn't need to be done immediately. Maybe it needs to be done 2 days from now. So in the email, you can just say, hey, this just popped in my head, not urgent. I'll just need it by Tuesday, or I'll just need it by Thursday. Or, I do need this as, fairly quickly, first thing tomorrow morning, or what sort of thing, right? So giving more guidelines to the person, to the receiver, as to when you need a response back can be really helpful for people as well to understand, or to diminish the level of immediacy and urgency. I think there's a whole separate conversation that we don't have to talk about, which is how to make not everything an emergency and be super urgent. Like, let's be more realistic on that. But, that's a thing for another time. But I do think as leaders, it's important. And also for the leaders, right? Like, take that extra pause of why are you working so late? And how can maybe you practice your own self-care and restraint on working all the extra hours? And maybe you need to have a conversation as a leader with your boss about your own workload and how that can be managed a bit better, or what priorities you need to be shifting on and focusing on, right? So I think it brings up a lot of conversation.
Mm. No, that's great, Lydia. So, give me more of a sense too of what else you would cover when addressing wellness and reducing burnout with an organization. So yeah, you figure
Mhm.
here are ways that you could address some of these things, establish boundaries. Uh, People within the organization lean into their purpose, address the amount of workload that they have on. But any other components in terms of the how we heal or overcome the amount of burnout that you're seeing?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think so when I talk about burnout within organizations and do workshops for companies, I share that there's a three-pronged approach to this. So one is the employee themselves or individuals, two is the leaders, and three is the organization as a whole. Um, I think what I've been seeing a lot of, or what we've been seeing a lot of, is a focus on the individual, right? So, here's lots of information, here's workshops on, how to exercise better and what to eat and why you should sleep and this kind of stuff, which is really great and super helpful. And of course, I give these workshops. I'm a proponent of people taking control of their own wellness. But in the past, that's been the focus. And unfortunately, I am seeing a shift where organizations are now realizing that they have this role to play as well. So that's where I'm talking about the leadership side. And then there's also really the organizational side as well. And there's two big things that I see from the organizational side. One is really, as a company, as an organization, working to create a culture of wellness and well-being within the organization. And I'll explain that. And then two, also making sure that the organization is also psychologically safe and that there's psychological health and safety at the workplace. I think those are they're huge. Those are huge, huge things. They don't get solved overnight. But what I would love to see is more organizations actually start to take these things seriously, to look at the internal systemic things that are happening within the workplace. So, in terms of, for example, the creating a culture of well-being, that could be things like having no meeting days or a no meeting half a day, right? Like, Friday afternoons, there's no meetings, or Wednesday mornings, there's no meetings, right? Setting like company wide times. Like, I know local listeners here in Ottawa will know of Shopify, who at the beginning of the year basically like erased everybody's calendar invites and just scrapped most of meetings, and then people had to decide, like, evaluate what are the more important ones, right? That's a little extreme. You don't have to do it that way, but thinking about how can we give people a little more time back in their day, or again on meetings, having 25-minute meetings or 55-minute meetings or 50-minute meetings as opposed to 60 and 30. And what I see a lot of and what I hear a lot of, especially with public sector clients, is that people are stuck in like back to back to back meetings, and they don't have time for a break. They don't have time literally for their brain to just have a pause. And it can be so mentally overwhelming when you just go from one meeting to the next, whether it's in person or whether it's online, right? Another thing that I know of some companies that are doing is that they build in some metrics around well-being into their performance management. So, for example, leaders across the organization, one of their performance metrics is did your reports take their vacation days, right? Or how many days did they take? Um, and again, it's the idea that that is so important, and it's recognized that that is obviously taking vacation days is not going to solve everything, but it's still a very important part of people taking rest and a break. And so the organizations have realized that and have built it in enough that they are holding their leaders accountable to be checking in on their staff to make sure that they are taking the appropriate amount of time away from work, which I think is wonderful.
All right. That is gold. And I come from a profession where no days off is used to be
Mm,
admirable, right?
right.
And so
Yeah.
to have a culture where, hey, you didn't take your days off, shame on you. This is,
Hmm.
I think, or I shouldn't say shame. I like carrot over
Yeah.
the stick. You took
Yeah.
your days off. Well done, sir
Well,
or ma'am. And
yeah.
I think that would be
And
beautiful
it's
to see.
totally. And the thing is that it's holding the leaders somewhat accountable to that, which means they should be tracking it in a certain sense and looking when they have one-on-one meetings with their reports, checking in and being like, hey, when was the last time you took some vacation days? How many do you have left? If you have lots, well, you should take some. um, and then being a support to make sure that obviously work's covered off and things are handled appropriately and that sort of thing. But I love that it really places some onus on the leader to have these discussions with their teams and to then be encouraging their teams to actually be taking time off. Again, I don't think it's the solve magic pill fix, but it is one component that is very important. So yeah, and there's so many different ways for organizations to kind of embed wellness and well-being into the overall culture, and it doesn't always look like having a once a week yoga or having healthy foods. It's more structural, and the bonus is that it helps productivity. When you structure the internal practices of your company to be geared towards improving well-being, you are actually going to be improving the productivity and the efficiency of your staff.
I do not deny that. I like it. That is very, in my opinion, so intuitive that I mean, this is why I think the topic is so important when we are trying to do more with less these days.
Mm-hmm.
You got to address wellness. Full stop. Full stop.
Absolutely.
So, a bit of a biased question because of being in a leadership role and recently writing a book on the topic.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the aspects that us as leaders should be doing? Like I fully believe that we do need to lead by example. That's a non-starter for me.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta be an example of the change you want to see for folks. Are there other principles that leaders need to be considering when addressing wellness in their organization?
So I mean, like in addition to the big lead by example piece, yeah, I mean, I think uh, checking in and really being sincere about that as well, and not just I like to joke the whole like, how are you? I'm good, thanks. How are you? I'm good. Like we all do that, but really learning about your team, learning about their lives a little bit more. This was really, really important, especially during the pandemic, where we got a glimpse a little bit more into people's lives and how that affected them. And we had a lot of people that were dealing with the maybe children at home, but also elderly parents, or they were alone a lot, and so they were very isolated. Right, so it was interesting to see how people's external life and what that looks like really does have an impact on their health and how they show up at work sometimes. And so I think getting a sense of that as a leader is really helpful. It doesn't, I'm not talking about being inappropriately nosy, right? But just kind of understanding the basics, right? I know a lot of people in, like, I would say probably 50-ish range, or even, with healthy parents, even in their 60s, low 60s, where they are now in that category of dealing with elderly parents. And that can be extremely time consuming, extremely challenging. It can be distressing, distracting, right? So let's say, as an example, you have a staff member who's in that situation. Knowing that is happening, can be helpful for you to just get a pulse on them, or be more understanding and compassionate if they need to step away for a couple hours out of a day because they have to go look at a nursing home or something. I don't know, right? Like, take a phone call, talk to their parent's dentist because the parent can't do that. Who knows, right? There's so many things that they might need to be doing. But that's just an example of like how having a glimpse into somebody's life, I think sometimes can help make you more compassionate as a leader. I think a lot of times leaders can default to the worker is just your worker, and that is the only thing that they do, as opposed to them being a full-bodied human that has external things going on. So I think that can be something certainly that can be really helpful, and really just being open to having these conversations. I think I've seen this talked about a lot recently, about how emotional intelligence is the new IQ, right? So, for leaders who may be less versed in emotional intelligence, I would encourage, more research, more like take a course on it, just learn a little bit more about how maybe you can be improving your emotional intelligence, because that certainly, I think, is the one of the key leadership skills that is needed now and will be needed into the future.
Could not agree more. I feel like the EQ piece in an era where we're talking healing, when we need to to be connected, is so important. And I really like that advice, Lydia, of getting to know your staff. I can't count how much you learn by being open and offering that ear to your
Mm-hmm.
colleague or to your staff member, and it creates compassion. It creates a wantingness to help, to 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 better serve. So I think it's, yeah, I think people do it, but maybe not consciously sometimes. And I think putting that front and center, especially when you're trying to recover, you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
improve on your current state of affairs. This is vital. I really think it is. Um, so when it comes to the individual, like, I know this is the part that gets highlighted the most, and when we've done wellness initiatives, and we started a wellness program about 2 years ago, we really focused on this part, which you in some ways arguably is easier to control. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm wondering if you could highlight some of the areas that you feel are important to improve people's wellness at an individual level.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, and I mean, please don't get me wrong. Like, all the three prongs have a role to play, have a responsibility to play. It's just the individual piece has been the only piece that people have been looking at in terms of workplace wellness. And we just need more of the leadership side and the whole organizational kind of cultural side to kind of jump in and take their responsibilities. But for sure, individuals absolutely can be taking a role and should be taking a role in their own health and wellness. Okay, some of the key things I would say, I mean, I'm sure you would agree on the foundational pieces in terms of wellness, which would be sleep, movement, and nutrition. Right? I think for sure, sleep. To me, it's the secret sauce. It's like one of the most underrated health things you can be doing. And unfortunately, so many people are not getting enough sleep or the good quality of sleep. So I, it's so hard to rank them, and I don't want to rank them, so don't ask me to rank them. But it's definitely there as a pillar of foundation for your health. So if somebody is not getting a good enough sleep and long enough sleep, that is absolutely something to look into. Movement, for me, especially like, so my whole philosophy is being very realistic and focusing on consistency over perfection. And so I often don't even talk about exercise because people aren't even moving enough, like at a basic level. So I don't even focus too much on exercise because if you're not even moving enough, you're probably not going to be exercising. So let's start with moving more, right? So I'm a huge proponent of just getting people up and moving, going on walks, doing dance parties in their living room. I love the use a bathroom on another floor, whether it's at home or at the office, if that's accessible to you. Right? So like
That's a
go
good
to
one.
the bathroom, right? Go to
I
the
never, I
bathroom that's
never, I
far
never,
away.
I never thought of that one. That's brilliant, actually.
Yes, pass that one along to everybody. It's the one of the best ones. It's only like maybe 2 minutes more of time, but you're going to get that many more steps, that much more movement,
And stairs,
um, and stairs, right? So if
two
you
at a
have an
time. By the way,
office,
two at a time is my thing.
yes, love it. Get that heart pumping for sure, two at a time. Um, right? But it's so brilliant, and it's not complicated, right? I'm a huge fan of keeping it simple and not complicated. From nutrition, my big advice, again, simple, just focus on the 80-20, right? 80% of the time, eat the fresh food, eat the fresh fruits and vegetables, meats, less packaged items. 20%, don't even worry about it. Enjoy. We got to live life. If there's one thing for me that my takeaway from the pandemic is, and all the whole rest of like world being on fire nonsense, is just you have to live a good life now. So that doesn't mean depriving yourself, but it also doesn't mean choosing to be unhealthy all the time, right? We can make good, healthy choices most of the time. So those are my three foundation pieces. The other piece that I love to talk about, and you mentioned it because I know I sort of alluded to it, but is boundaries. Setting boundaries for yourself in a variety of ways. So, from a technology standpoint, from a work standpoint, from a people standpoint, right? I often counsel people that if they don't know where they need to set a boundary, pay attention to what triggers a stress response, what gets you stressed, right? And that's probably an area where you probably need to set a boundary. Um, I encourage people to review their social media, do a social media audit, and unfollow people or unfriend people who their content isn't serving you. Maybe it just gets you riled up or angry, or it's just makes you feel bad about yourself for whatever reason. I do believe in diversity of thought. And so I purposely follow people with whom I don't always agree with their point of view, but it can be how they present their point of view, right? So I'm definitely not encouraging only, you know, bubbling yourself in terms of thoughts. But certainly there was a lot of negativity during the pandemic. I was muting people left, right, and center. And I think that's really important. Technology boundaries are key. For me, my phone goes on do not disturb at 8:30 p.m. every night, like even on the weekends. And it goes charges in my desk. I don't even look at it after 8. Okay, I break the rule sometimes, right? But generally speaking, after 8:30, people can't get a hold of me, and everybody knows. And they know that if they message me, they can message me. It's fine. I'll just respond, first thing in the morning or like in the morning after I do my journaling. Right? So it doesn't have to be these boundaries necessarily, but think about for you, what are the boundaries that you need? What could be helpful in um, reducing some of the stimulation from the phone? And just, I'm not against spending time on your phone. It can be a great distraction. It can be entertaining or educational. But at a certain point, it needs to go away, right? Other technology things as well, right? Like the notifications, I'm a huge advocate for getting rid of as many notifications as possible. Um, I am in practice, it shall be a lifelong practice, but to be better at monotasking. We've been, since I've been working, multitasking has been like the holy grail of the skill that people think they should have, right? It's literally been like on my resume since I graduated university. Um, and just from research that I've seen and just from experience in my own self, multitasking is a myth. It makes things slower. You're less effective at the thing you are doing. And I'm really not good at it, but I really try to do monotasking and to get myself more focused. I think, I don't know how, if from your perspective in healthcare, if you've seen a lot more of like people thinking they have ADHD or at least even demonstrating like AD. I feel like I have ADHD tendencies and I don't have ADHD, but because of how we've been programmed and how we're so used to bopping back and forth from all the things, I feel like that I like to call it sometimes like my brain just feels on fire,
Mm.
right? And when we stop the multitasking, it actually just like it calms the brain down and you can be more focused and more alert and more um, better actually at the task that you're trying to do. So that is for me, that's something that I'm working on. But yeah, those are my there's lots more I could share, but those are my top, I would say.
No, those are great, Lydia. Honestly, this is golden. I was just reflecting on the comment you had about multitasking as an ICU doc. You're right. Like we
Mm,
technically, you want to be to a certain degree uni-focused at tasks depending on what's going on. But one of the talents I feel like we need to have, or at least I feel I need to have, is processing a lot of information at once. Walking into a
mm-hmm,
room, looking at the patient, reading what the nurse, reading the face of the nurse to see if there's urgency, looking at the vitals, looking at the monitor, people
mm-hmm,
as the resident, as the resident getting ready to do the procedure, what are the steps I need to do to intubate or whatever the procedure I might have to do with this patient. So my brain
mm-hmm,
is accustomed to being on fire, as you say, but at times
mm-hmm,
you just need to shut it down. Like I can't tell you how many times where I'll just take a deep breath consciously. I try to do it every time before,
mm-hmm,
as a physiologic sigh before
mm-hmm.
grabbing my phone. And
Yeah.
there are times where you just like feel it, that need to relax. I was like, wow, I
Mm-hmm.
was wound up. My brain was on fire.
Yeah.
It truly was. And I think that's part of the exhaustion of our jobs at times. And
Mm-hmm.
as we said, part of the recovering from burnout and all
Mm-hmm.
these things is the fact that we have been on fire and not taking enough
Mm-hmm.
time to slow down. So
Yeah.
I I I really think that point is essential. Um, but what are the other points you made earlier? Sorry, you look like you were about to say something. I didn't.
Yeah, I just had another thought that came up in my mind as you were saying that is absolutely. So obviously you know this, but like clearly you're, I would say, mostly operate in a fight or flight state at your job, right? Especially when you have a problem, right, that you have to attend to, like a sick person, dying person right in front of you, right? But you can't, and people shouldn't be in a state of fight or flight for endless amounts of time, right? So I love that you are aware of this and that you take those deep breaths when you need them. And what you're doing, as you know, probably is bringing some, um, bring down your nervous system, right? And bringing your nervous system into that state of like rest and reset. And so I think another thing for individuals to be doing is being aware of their body's state when they are in that amped up, super hyper adrenaline mode, sometimes it can be really helpful, right? Like your brain is really fast at processing. Obviously, you have to do that sometimes, but don't be in that mode. Ideally, if you can help it for an entire day, like even if you can have like a sliver, like a few minutes, 1 to 3 minutes even of like time where you just calm your body physically down, it can have a huge, huge impact on your health, right? So I think that's important um, to remember as well, that you want to be doing that. And the best way, you just gave the example, deep breathing, right? Taking those deep breaths, even just 1 to 2 minutes, is really significant. So thanks for sharing that example, because it made me think of that point, which is key for people, and even for people who are not ICU doctors. Everybody.
100%, 100%. And maybe this might be a good point to end with, Lydia. What about joy, finding joy?
Mm,
How do you, whether it's your own personal experience, what you do to find joy, but how do you coach
mm,
people
mm.
into finding joy?
So it's a lot of it really initially is about the self-awareness. That's one of the things that it really is a theme throughout all of the work that I do, is helping people to increase their own self-awareness. So whether it's their self-awareness about their health, or as a leader, whether it's self-awareness about their own leadership skills and styles. Too often we are just going through life on autopilot and we're not really paying attention. And in terms of our health, our bodies are constantly talking to us and giving us feedback, right? And oftentimes we just ignore it. We've learned to ignore it as adults. We don't pay attention. And so I think helping people to get that self-awareness back is super important. So when I'm talking to people about joy, it's really about, if you don't know the answer as to what brings you joy, then first off, start just paying attention, right? Pay attention to, when you're doing certain activities, does it bring you joy? And if you don't have any activities currently that bring you joy, think about what brought you joy when you were younger, when you were a child, when you were a teenager, maybe in your like young 20s, when life was still a little more carefree, maybe. What were the things that brought you joy? Or just be open to trying new things. There's so much out there. There's so many kind of hobby type things, or maybe it's being with friends or being with family or petting a dog. Like literally one of my best friends, we cannot travel anywhere together walking without her stopping at every single dog and being like, "Oh my goodness, who's a good boy?" And like all into the dog. And that brings her so much joy. So maybe that's, for some people, they need to just, it sounds really silly, but like if they don't own a dog, like go on a walk and say hi to other people's dogs. I don't know. Right? But it's figuring out for you what brings you joy, and then trying to get that in as much as possible. If it can't be daily, then at least a few times a week, or at least weekly, right? So for me, my puppy, I do have a puppy. She brings me so much joy. Spending time with my niece and nephew. They live in Hamilton, so 6 hours away. But I go on FaceTime with them very often, and we hang out. And so they bring me a lot of joy. Being outside in the sunshine, being near water, being with friends. These are things. Doing certain hobbies. I knit, crochet, so doing some kind of like crafty DIY stuff. These are things that bring me joy. And so, again, not always, but as I can, I try and do at least something every single day that's going to bring a smile to my face, a genuine smile to my face, laughter, that really good, happy feeling in my heart. And this is honestly, this is one of the things that I learned from the burnout, was that I wasn't doing enough things that brought me joy, or any at that point, things that brought me joy, or enough fun things, or had enough laughter in my day. I mean, I loved the work I was doing, but it got to be almost too serious, I guess, in a weird way. And I was just working a lot again because I liked it, but I didn't have the other elements that, are necessary for like a full rounded, being a full rounded person, right? So I would encourage people to just explore and have fun with it, right? That's part of the point, and can be part of the fun as well, part of the journey.
I love this so much. My brain is just going off in terms of how to create more joy in one's life. And for me, with all seriousness, synchronized swimming. That's probably
Mm.
no. I'm totally joking.
Oh, I was like participating or watching.
Oh
I
my god!
synchronized swimming is so fun.
Say that again.
Synchronized swimming is so fun, like to watch.
Mm,
Like it's
mm,
so no, I think it's okay. They are so talented.
yes, I will agree with that.
Like so I
And
mean as a fitness
strong.
person, when I watch, I am appreciating how challenging what they are doing is. Like it is not easy to do what they do.
I agree with you 100%, but I would
It's
rather
hilarious. I
watch
get it. It's
people throw
hilarious.
luggage in the streets than
Oh
watch
no.
synchronized swimming. But yeah, no,
Okay, so
I would
that's not
totally.
what brings you joy.
That's
Okay, so
not.
don't
No,
do
yeah,
that.
I was totally being facetious, but honestly, Lydia, this has been great. And I don't know. I feel like this is a conversation that many people are going to benefit from, whether it's individually, if they're in a leadership position, or they're uh, people that are involved in decision making at a corporate level. I think this has been absolutely golden. So, if people want to track you down, they want to learn
Hmm.
more about all that Lydia has to offer,
Hmm.
where can they go?
Yeah, so two places. So my LinkedIn profile. So you can just search me up, Lydia Francesco. And I'm posting pretty much almost every day, Monday to Friday, not always, but as much as I can. I post lots of these great nuggets of wisdom that I've shared with you today. And then also my website, Fit Healthy 3.
Incredible. And we'll have all the links in the show notes. Lydia, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Oh my gosh, it was my pleasure. I'm glad we made this happen.